in Daniel 11, and we're going to start with verse 29. Verse 29. At the appointed time, he, and the he that we're referring to is Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who is the one who was a foreshadowing of the Antichrist, okay? At the appointed time, he will return and come into the south, but this last time it will not turn out the way it did before. For ships of Kittim, that's Cyprus, will come against him. Therefore, he will be disheartened, and will return and become enraged at the holy covenant and take action, so that he will come back and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice. And they will set up the abomination of desolation. By smooth words, he will turn to godliness or godlessness those who act wickedly towards the covenant. But the people who know their God will display strength and take action. Now, let me just give the historical commentary of what actually happened. This is something that Daniel won't even see, because Daniel was already 84 when he got this vision. And it's still the time of the Medes and the Persians. So, and actually, just the beginning of the Greek portion. So he won't be around for these things, but it's prophetic. But as we said, it's also prophetic for the future at the end of time. But let me just talk about the history that he would not see that happened relatively close to when he lived. For a second time, Antiochus took out his frustrations on the Jews, the city of Jerusalem, and their temple. He vented his fury against the Holy Covenant, the entire Mosaic system, favoring any renegade Jews who turned to help him. He desecrated the temple and abolished the daily sacrifice. Antiochus sent his general Apollonius with 22,000 soldiers into Jerusalem on what was reported to be a mission. But they attacked Jerusalem on the Sabbath, killed many people, took many women and children as slaves, and plundered and burned the city. Seeking to exterminate Judaism and to Hellenize the Jews, he forbid the Jews to follow their religious practices, including their festivals and circumcision, and commanded that copies of the law would be burned. Then he set up the abomination that causes desolation. In this culminating act, he erected on December 16th, 167 BC, an altar to Zeus on the altar of burnt offerings outside the temple, and had a pig offered on the altar. The Jews were compelled to offer a pig on the 25th of each month to celebrate Antiochus' birthday. Antiochus promised apostate Jews, those who violated the covenant, great reward if they would set aside the God of Israel and worship Zeus, the god of Greece. Many in Israel were persuaded by his promises, his smooth words or flattery, and worshiped the false god. However, a small remnant remained faithful to God, refusing to engage in those abominable practices. Antiochus V died insane in Persia in 163 BC. So we covered that last time. I just wanted to in a sense, stir your memories with this, because it's important to recognize this is a foreshadowing of what will happen at the end of time. And it's part of the picture to realize that he was from the Greek civilization. He wanted to Hellenize the Jews, and the way he wanted to do it is by bringing in these false gods, Zeus, Hera, Apollo, Aphrodite, all them, and have the Jews worship them. And some of the Jews did, instead of the true and living God. So let's carry on in the passage now. And so let's look at verse 33. Those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many. That is, there will be godly Jews who will understand what's going on when this happens to them, and they will give understanding to others. Yet they will fall by the sword and by the flame, by captivity and by plunder for many days. Now, when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in hypocrisy, meaning that some of the Jews that will try to actually help will not do so with right motives. They will be hypocrites. And so you would never know the ones that were necessarily on board and the ones who weren't as they went against Antiochus. Verse 35, some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time. Now I'm going to read you the last insert in terms of historically what happened. The Jews who refused to submit to Antiochus' false religious system were persecuted and murdered for their faith. The word fall in verse 33 and verse 34 literally means stumble. It refers to severe suffering on the part of many and death to others. This has in view the rise of the Maccabean revolt. Matthias, a priest, was the father of 5 sons. One of them, Judas, became well known by refurbishing and restoring the temple in late 164 BC. He was called Judas Maccabeus, and that means the hammerer. In 166, Matthias refused to submit to this false religious system. He and his sons fled from Jerusalem to the mountains and began the Maccabean revolt. At first, only a few Jews joined them, but as the movement became popular, many joined them, some out of sincere motives and some from false motives. The suffering that the faithful endured served to refine and purify them. It had been previously given to Daniel that the temple would be desecrated for a short time. Here, Daniel was assured that this persecution would run its course and then be lifted, for its end will still come at the appointed time. So that's the last of the entries in terms of the history of this vision that Daniel had, or message that he was given of what would happen in the near future. And we're going to now transition, and I want you to actually see this if you possibly. We're going to transition from near to far. And it's very plain if you look closely. First of all, in verse 35, notice at the end, I'll read the whole verse, some of those who have insight will fall in order to refine, purge, and make them pure. That is in the near future. But then he says, until the end time, because it is still to come at the appointed time, which means that everything has been talked of to this point has been the near future prophecy. But it's transitioning now, and it's going to change, and it's going to refer to the appointed time, the time of the end. In verse 36, then the king will do as he pleases. The king will do as he pleases. Now, the first thought is, oh, well, he's continuing on talking about Antiochus. But he's just said that it was not yet the end time, and he's given us an idea that this is in the future. But secondly, notice that he says just the king. We've been talking about the king of the south and the king of the north. Antiochus was actually the king of the north. It was not entitled to him to be the king. He took the throne, but that is where he was from, the Seleucids, and he would have been referred to as the king of the north. This is not the king of the north. This isn't the king of the south. And then it says, then the king will do as he pleases. That takes us back to the beginning of talking about this whole Greek empire, and that it started with Alexander the Great, and he did as he pleased. So now we're talking about the end of time, and we realize that now in this prophecy, it's taking us to a more broad perspective, kind of like how it was with Alexander the Great, that this king is going to be looking in a worldwide domination rather than just in the areas of the commanders who divided Alexander's area. So the king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. All right, so first of all, we already know from Antiochus, his historical account, we know that he was trying to actually get them to actually worship Zeus. And now, in this context, this king is not after that. In fact, it says that he will not exalt any other god except for himself. He's not interested, in a sense, in doing what the foreshadowing figure did. He, in fact, wants to make himself the object of worship. And because of that, he'll speak monstrous things against the God of gods, that's Yahweh, the God of the Jews. And then the last part of verse 36, and he will prosper until the indignation is finished. For that which is decreed will be done. So we even get the time period. It's the time period of indignation. That's not during that period of time of the foreshadowing. That's at the end. And it refers to the time of wrath when God will pour out his wrath on the earth. Specifically, what he's talking about is the tribulation period. But this figure that he's talking about will exist even before the tribulation period. It's just that the wrath will fall in those 7 years. Are we together? Okay, so his heart is to exalt himself, and this will all take place, but it will finally come to an end when the indignation is finished and God pours out his wrath upon him. And why? Because of the last part of the verse, for that which is decreed will be done. And that's something, it's a theme of the book of Daniel. What is decreed will be done. And another way of saying it is heaven rules. That God is the one who determines the times. And he will only have a ruler there as long as he wants him. And that God will ultimately bring everything under judgment. And he will fulfill his plan. And that is to put Jesus as his king in Jerusalem. That's where we're going. So I just want to clarify this a little bit. So you got to leave Daniel. We're coming back. But go with me to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Just to kind of take a New Testament explanation of what we're reading in Daniel. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 2. 2 Thessalonians 2:2. That you not be quickly shaken from your composure or be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter as if from us to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. Now, just so you know the background of this, in the New Testament church, as time went on, there were false messages put out there by false spirits that the day of the Lord had already come. Well, what is the day of the Lord? The day of the Lord is the period of indignation that we just talked about. The day, it's not one day, all right? It's actually at least 7 years, because that's the period of the tribulation. I believe the day of the Lord begins with the rapture of the church, and then the tribulation begins, and it goes for the 7 years. That's the day of the Lord. And so there was a message out that had already started. You know, if you look at the internet today, you have no problem believing that kind of thing could happen. That they would believe a rumor of something. Because I can't even believe sometimes what I hear about and read about in terms of how Scripture gets twisted and turned, and this happens before that. I won't tell you the context of this, but, you know, there are some who believe we're in the millennium right now. You have got to be kidding me. There's a problem there. As my daughter said, don't they read their Bible? Anyway. Amen. That's right. Verse 3. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first. Now, I've taught this passage many times, and you know that the Greek is apostasia, and because it sounds like apostasy, it gets put in here that is what he means here. But the real word in the Greek just simply means depart. And in other places, apostasy is actually used along with faith. And if you put the two together, depart from faith, then yes, it's apostasy. But here, it doesn't say that. It says depart. So if you're going to read this right, it says, let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the departure comes first. And the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. So we read this and we understand what he's saying is someone or something needs to depart before the man of lawlessness, who is the Antichrist, who is the one that what we're reading about in Daniel is ultimately referring to. Before he can actually come, this departure has to happen. Why is he bringing up? Because he's making the point, there's no way the day of the Lord could happen, because it's not going to happen until first the departure, and then secondly, the man of lawlessness shows up, the son of destruction. Verse 4, who opposes, it sounds like the same guy, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Now, we're going to get into it, especially when we get into the last chapter of Daniel, that part of what will indicate that this is the Antichrist is at a point in his being in a reigning position. He will actually go into the temple of the Jews and not put a pig there, or not want them to serve Zeus. He will declare himself God in the temple. And that's the real abomination of desolation when that takes place. So again, he doesn't want any kind of worship going on, the worship of himself, and he's going to declare himself God in the temple, which also means that he has a lot of interest in Israel. Because if you are the Antichrist, it means instead of Christ, you have to, in a sense, if you're gonna pose as someone, you gotta pose in the setting that real individual would be in. And of course, we know that God's purpose is that the Messiah will reign from Jerusalem. So because of that, that's why he's interested in it. That's why he wants to declare himself God there. That's why Satan from the beginning said, you're not the true God, I'm the true God. So verse 5, do you remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you of these things? It sounds to me like that was pretty important. Verse 6, and you know what restrains him now. Okay, you know what restrains the man of lawlessness now, so that in his time he will be revealed. Something is holding it back. And if you put the two things together, whatever has to depart is holding back evil. And when whatever it is departs, then evil is going to fully come. And then the day of the Lord is here. Verse 7, for the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he's taken out of the way. Well, another thing is that it's a he. It's a he. It says it right there. Whatever this is a he. And he would then also be the one who would have to depart. Verse 8. Then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. Notice that when the Lord does come, and we're going to come with him as the raptured church, but when he does come, he's going to slay him with the breath of his mouth. There's not a lot of a contest there, okay? It's supernaturally, you're out of here, okay? Verse 9, that is the one who is coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and wonders, and with all deception of wickedness for those who perish because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. So part of the judgment, and I know we've said this before, but there are new people among us, and also it's good to just remember, part of God's judgment and the day of the Lord is to remove the church. And you say, well, how do you know it's the church? Because it's Christ in his church. The devil's not too concerned about us as people. the devil's concerned about the fact that Christ dwells within us. He's our head. He's the authority over us. We, because he is in us, we are the light of this world, and we are sanctifying this world, setting it apart that if any would be saved, that they would be saved. Right. So part of God's judgment will be to remove that sanctifying element of Christ in his church. Now, some say that the restrainer is the Holy Spirit. The problem with that is the Holy Spirit's God. He doesn't somehow only locate here or locate there. He's everywhere. That's right. And the Holy Spirit's still going to be working even in the tribulation period of time, right? What is different about the tribulation period of time is that the head of the church and his body will no longer be on earth. We will have been taken up, all right? Now, Christ still exists, obviously, but on earth, will they notice a difference? Well, they'll notice a difference. And that's when the man of lawlessness comes, and then that's when it's going to be after that 7-year tribulation period that we come back with Christ, and he's going to slay the devil and the Antichrist and the false prophet. He's going to take care of all of them, and we will be with him. So this, in a sense, brings clarity. One, it's an encouragement. A lot of things about the Antichrist you're not going to actually even witness or see, because you'll already be gone. Now, you will witness when you come back on white horses with Christ, the Lord breathing and taking him out. You will see that. But I will say this, that the figure who will be the Antichrist will be on the scene even before the tribulation, because he's not going to, obviously has to grow up, right? And when we went through the book of Revelation, we learned the fact that initially he is not possessed by the high-ranking, unseen principality power that will actually possess him. It isn't initially the case that he has the full power of Satan behind him, and he will be a political figure, and he will be on the scene, but no one will know that. I mean, you might get some clues, but you're not going to know that, because he will not do the signs and wonders and that sort of thing until after the church is already raptured. All right, so let's go back to Daniel. And I want to pull in from Daniel itself a couple things from the past. So we're almost done with this book. And so just a couple things. Again, all to do with the same subject. Go to Daniel 7. Daniel 7 and verse 3. Actually, I want to do it in this order. Let's go with Daniel 8 first. It'll make more sense. Daniel 8, verse 19. Daniel 8:19 says this. He said, "Behold, I am coming to let you know," this is an angel, "what will occur at the final period of indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end." So this is a previous vision that he had seen, revealing the end times, and this one it's like very much more pinpointed to the final period of indignation for the time of wrath. And it pertains to the appointed time of the end. Now, jump down to verse 21. The shaggy goat, remember the shaggy goat, represents the kingdom of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. That's Alexander the Great. Okay, verse 22. The broken horn and the 4 horns that arose in its place represent 4 kingdoms which will arise from his nation, although not with his power. So this, in a sense, is a shorter version of what we read in chapter 11, okay? And it pinpoints more of what's happening at the end of the time, but I wanted to bring it up for this reason. Remember those 4 horns represent how the kingdom will be divided into 4 different kingdoms. And we talked about the king of the south, the king of the north, and so forth. Okay, verse 23. In the latter period of their rule, when the transgressors have run their course, okay, we're at the end in this context now, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. Remember how we said what the literal of that is in the Greek? It's strong of face and ambiguous of speech. Strong of face, looking like they know what they're talking about, and they have authority, but ambiguous. You never really know what they're saying. Unfortunately, in the political world today, we understand what that means. Don't we?
Yes, we do.
Okay, verse 24. His power will be mighty, but not by his own power. It's satanic. And he will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and the holy people. So he's going to be after rulers because he doesn't want anyone to be worshiped other than him. He wants to be over the entire world, and he is definitely after the holy people because they represent God, and he wants nothing to do with God. Verse 25. And through his shrewdness, he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence, and he will magnify himself in his heart. And he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princesses. Who's that? Jesus. But he will be broken without human agency, specifically by the breath of that prince that he wants to get rid of. Right? So we see here something very important. We see the occurrences at the end of time in this period of indignation, but I want you to keep remembering that it concurs that this man of lawlessness, this Antichrist, will have his origins in Greece. In Greece. And initially he will have in his foreshadowing with Antiochus, he will actually try to bring false gods upon them with Zeus and so forth. But in the end times, he will be done with gods. He wants to be God, but he will still use Western civilization and Greek culture to prepare and bring about what he wants. Atheism, a scientific perspective, technologies, that's what he's going to use. He will not acknowledge any other God but himself. So, and even philosophy, there is no God. That kind of thing is what I will use. Okay, so that's important, but now there's another one that was even before this vision. Look at Daniel chapter 7. That's where I was going to go to a minute ago. Daniel 7 and verse 3. Very quickly, remember this one? And 4 great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. Very important. They all came up at the same time. Okay? The first was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until his wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind was also given to it. So whatever nation that was, initially it had power and a dominating influence over the entire world at that time, and also promoted freedom. The idea of both the lion and the eagle. But over a period of time, what happened was that eagle's feathers were plucked out. And it lost its freedom. And it also lost the overriding authority that it had in the world as the lion. It was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a human mind was also given to it. It became humanitarian and men-centered. That's the first one. Verse 5, and behold, another beast, a second one resembling a bear. And it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, arise, devour much meat. This nation was known and actually decreed to be one that would be aggressive and devour other nations. The next one, verse 6, after this I kept looking, and behold, another one like a leopard. So something like a lion, but not really dominating, but more in the sense of the speed and the cunning, all right? Which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. It had a conspicuous division of the authority into 4 in this particular nation. And then lastly, number 7, after this I kept looking in night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying, extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder. Now I'll just say this, that they were all there in the world at that time, and this particular one, this iron one that was monstrous, not even describe what kind of beast it is going to actually then take over what is the rule of all of the other nations and rule the entire world. In the last part of that verse, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. Behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. So we have like this horn, again, like inconspicuous, kind of sneaking in there, and then tearing out 3 other horns of the 10, and assuming that role of authority, not just as one of the 10, but actually demonstrating that it was in control over the entirety of that kingdom. So a couple things to bring up. We mentioned this when we went through it, and we're going to read a little bit more of this. This is actually referring to that last nation, this beast that was extremely strong and terrifying. Well, that will be the revived Roman Empire, all right? And as a part of the revived Roman Empire, we have, again, this horn, kind of similar to what we read about, with the goat, a horn showing up. And then actually being one that tears out others and then assumes responsibility from there. One thing that's kind of clear is that horn wasn't necessarily originally from there, but showed up and then gained authority. I don't think it's too far of a stretch to believe that the Antichrist, his origins will be from a Greek Western civilization sort of culture, and maybe even he will be Greek himself. But he will, when he is in his role in terms of taking and dominating the whole world, he will be one of those leaders that are part of the revived Roman Empire. You just put the two together, and it seems like it has to be. Let's read just a little bit more about this. Look at verse 19. Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and the claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance than its associates. Okay, you're going to jump now down to verse 23. Then he said, the 4th beast will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, and tread it down and crush it. And for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones and subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a times. You've figured that out. In terms of periods, it means 3.5 years. And it's referring to halfway through the 7-year tribulation period is when the Antichrist goes into the temple, declares himself God. He will speak out against the Most High. He will be wanting worship, demanding worship. So, one last part. Turn with me to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. We're going to just add one more thing to the picture. Chapter 9, verse 27. And he, okay, who's the he here? It's the prince who will come from the revived Roman Empire, which is the same guy we're talking about, the future Antichrist. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Remember the 70 times 7 weeks, okay? So for 1 week, that is 7 years, he will make a firm covenant with the many. Who are the many? The Jews, with Israel. But in the middle of the week, when is that? 3.5. In the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate. That's the Antichrist. But then this last phrase refers to Christ, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. That's when Christ comes and destroys him. It's all right there. Now, 2 points. And I'm gonna do my, there's a word for it. Doesn't matter. I'm going to make my explanation right now, okay? When it comes to prophecy, obviously, we're trusting in the Lord to help us to have an understanding to what we're reading. And so I'm going to propose something here. And just like with the book of Revelation, I'm going to say that, you know what? I'm going to put it together in a certain way so that maybe we could see how it maybe could all happen. But anyone who would say that they have it all down and they know every specific and it's going to happen this way, I'll tell you, that's a pretty amazing statement because prophecy it's something that is revealed, and we are finite, and sometimes we can't understand the fullness of what's going on. And the more that I read the scriptures, I encourage you to do the same. The more you read and you put passages together, though, it does dial in. And you get the confirmation that in one passage, it confers with the other passage. And you see, hey, the Lord is telling us something here. And we should try to put it together. And we might be wrong here or there, but at least we got our eyes open and we're prepared for what's coming. So having said that, I'm going to just say this. What we're going to see in that last chapter, chapter 11, and we went into detail with that about the 4 commanders, the king of the south, the king of the east, all the different areas, all right, of that empire. Could I suggest that corresponds when we're talking about the end-to-end, when the Antichrist is on site, of what we read here in Daniel about the 4 nations, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and this one incredibly ferocious and terrifying beast that will be obviously the revived Roman Empire. That the king of the south, the king of the north, the king of the east, the king of the west will correspond to the 4 of the dominating forces in the end times. You'll see why I think that makes sense, but it's one thing I wanted to point out, that this Antichrist is going to try to take over the whole world and will, as part of the revived Roman Empire, okay? But one of the priorities of this Antichrist in his smooth and flattering discourses, he wants to pull over the eyes of the Jews that, in fact, he's for them. And we just got through reading in Daniel 9 that he's going to actually, it says, and he will make a firm covenant with the Jews. So what we're going to see as we go forward in the passage that we're in is this individual will be actually championing his rule in the revived Roman Empire and taking over different areas of these other nations. But at the same time, he will gravitate towards Israel to make sure that things are smooth with them. And he will make a covenant with them to make them feel that he is on their side. That happens in the same point. So let's see if we can finish this real quick for today. Go back to Daniel and chapter 11. We're just going to the end of 11, okay? And we're going to pull it all together. So I'm going to read 36 again, and then we'll go forward. It says, "Then the king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt him and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods, and he will prosper until indignation is finished. For that which is decreed will be done. He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers." He doesn't care about Zeus. He's God, all right? "Or for the desire of women." Now, literally, he will not value women. Now, some would say maybe that means that he's homosexual. In my opinion, it's more that he's a chauvinist and that he has no regard for women whatsoever. And with that, I don't think he has any regard for the family. You know, remember what Paul warned about deceitful spirits, that in times they're going to actually say to abstain from marriage? I think it's more along those lines. But anyway, so no desire for women, nor will he show regard for any other god, for he will magnify himself above them all. But instead, he will honor a God of fortresses, a God whom his fathers did not know. He will honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and treasure. That word fortresses means force or mightiness, all right? He's going to honor a God. Now, I don't think it means that it's a literal God of his, oh, this fortress, I'm bowing down to it. I think that this is an explanation. He will actually, because he wants to be God himself, he will, in fact, use technology and use industrial involvement and superiority to fulfill his purposes. He is after all of the different nations, all of them to be subject to him. And as long as you do what he wants you to do, he'll give you what you want. But again, it says that a God whom his fathers did not know. Can I just suggest, in terms of Western civilization, if you go back to the 1800s and you look what's happened in the 1900s and in this time that we're living now, people back then would be blown away with computers, with technology, and so forth. And as we are near the end, I think this enemy is going to bow down to technology. Don't have time to go there, but maybe we will next week. In the book of Revelation explains about the false prophet who promotes the Antichrist will actually make it happen that everyone can have his image in their own house. Is it a hologram? I don't think it's going to be as simple as that, because I think it will also have demonic means that will actually allow for his image to be in everyone's houses, and not only to see him, but for them to be seen by him, to know whether they have the mark or not. Technology will increase, and you know what? If we would have talked about this, you know, at the beginning of the 1900s, they would look at us, you're from Mars, you know? Of course, they wouldn't know. Well, I guess they knew about Mars. But anyway. So, anyway, all right. So, again, verse 38. But instead, he will honor a God of fortresses, a God whom his father has not known. He will honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and treasures. It's about mammon. It's about wealth. Verse 38. He will take action against the strongest of fortresses, that is, other technologies, with the help of a foreign god. Who's the foreign god? Well, it can't be Zeus, and it's not Yahweh. Who's the foreign god? It's Satan. That's how he gets his power. He will give his great honor to those who acknowledge him, and will cause them to rule over the many, and will parcel out land for a price. At the end of time, the king of the south will collide with him, and the king of the north will storm against him. Now, even more so, this proves that we're talking about the Antichrist, because in this context of the earlier prophecies of near future events, he was the king of the north. So this is a different person. So the king of the south, the king of the north, they're going to storm against him with chariots, with horsemen, with many ships, and he will enter countries and overflow them and pass through. In other words, they'll bring their best technologies at him, and he will be mobile, and he will go from place to place conquering, dominating the entire world. But look at this, verse 41, he will also enter the beautiful land. That's Israel. And many countries will fall. Not the beautiful land, though, because he has a covenant with them. But these will be rescued out of his hand, Edom, Moab, and the foremost of the sons of Ammon. You know where they're, those from those people groups, you know where they live today? They live in Jordan. And so Jordan will be protected by the Lord from this individual. Why? Because of the relationship with Jacob and is also the relationship with Abraham. Because Moab and Ammon come from Lot, and Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Edom is the people group that come from Esau, the brother of Jacob. Verse 42, then he will stretch out his hand against other countries, and the land of Egypt will not escape. But he will gain control over the hidden treasures of gold and silver, and over all precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians will follow at his heels. He'll go south, even down into Egypt and as well into Africa, and he will dominate in that way. But rumors from the east and from the north will disturb him, and he will go forth with great wrath to destroy and annihilate many. Well, this is just speculation. Could it be that the rumors he's hearing of the north are in fact what is taking place or about ready to take place in terms of the Ezekiel war, and that God will bring Russia and the alliance down against Israel, that God can step in? Is he hearing rumors about that? Maybe, possibly not. But what about the East? Is this actually some sort of an indication of the fact that there will be a 200 million man army, that God will actually dry up the Euphrates River to let that army come? And is that what he's speaking of? We don't know. But there are wars and rumors of war. That's what Jesus says will be what was happening in this time. And he will be definitely that terrifying beast over the revived Roman Empire, trying to control the entire world, but maintaining temporarily this covenant with Israel, because he is deceiving them so that he can get into a place that he can get to that temple and reveal himself as God. Verse 45, he will pitch the tents of his royal pavilion between the seas. Which seas? How about the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee? Because it only makes sense if he pitches his royal, that is kingly pavilion, between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain. The beautiful holy mountain is Jerusalem. Right. Yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. That's the short story. It will be over, but we're going to continue on in chapter 12 next week. And we're going to pick up what happens in heaven at the same time all this is happening.